G'day and welcome to the latest edition of Play by Pod, a podcast that takes the mic off the sporting action across Australia and dives deep into the world of those who bring the action to life across all levels and sports across the country, while discussing one key issue that perhaps we can share some insight on and maybe improve your commentary. My name's Chris Yeendy, and today I'm joined by an absolute superstar, Adam Santarossa, who has just been everywhere when it comes to all things sport across Australia, and usually it is the busy time for him, but he's getting ready to explore sport on the other side of the world. Adam, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And if you are a fan of these sorts of things, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the Play by Pod on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Amazon Music, and if you want to see us in the flesh, check us out on YouTube as well. Mate, you are everywhere when it comes to sport. I've got to know you very fortunately through the SEN world, through A-League soccer, which is really starting to take off. Do you sort of get butterflies when it comes to this time of year? I know you're getting ready to head over to the States, but when the A-League season starts to hype up, I know that's sort of one of your favourite sports to cover. Is that where you get the butterflies up and you really can't wait to sink your teeth into it?
Yeah, particularly at the moment. I mean, most definitely the first 2 weeks of the season, I think have been incredible. You know, some of the goals we've seen, some of the action we've had. I mean, I tweeted it yesterday. You know, it's week 2, and just look at some of the craziness we've seen in the A-League. It's one of the more ridiculous leagues in the world in a good way. Like, you just never know what you're going to get in terms of the goals and the action. And so yeah, when the season rolls around, I'm sort of licking my lips, not only from a work front, but as a football fan. I think it's massively underrated, the A-League, and does get a bit of a bad rap at times. And look, if you're sleeping on the A-League, you're missing out, because it's just going to get better.
Do you think just from the soccer point of view, coming off the back of a very successful Women's World Cup, do you think that might have heightened the interest in the sport across Australia in general now as we transition to the A-League? And, you know, this past weekend, we've had the Women's World Cup qualifiers in WA with record crowds. Do you think that sort of interest has been heightened on the back of the World Cup?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we saw a couple of weeks ago, you know, a record crowd for Sydney FC. I was at that game against the Melbourne Victory to launch the season, and the Wanderers, I should say, in the women's. And yeah, incredible crowds. We've seen that across the league. The Matildas in the last couple of weeks as well. Their crowds continue to just surge on post World Cup. The TV ratings phenomenal in the World Cup, and that's continued as well. So I just think it was an eye opener to a lot of people. I mean, the hardcore football fans like myself, you know, we were all over the Women's World Cup. Spent way too much money on tickets myself. And then the rest of Australia sort of caught on as we hoped they would. And I think people are now, you know, understand the game a little bit more and see, you know, the enjoyment it brings and how competitive we can be from, you know, in terms of the Matildas on a world level. So, and the Socceroos as well, you know, making the round of 16. So it's a great time for Australian football. And I just think, you know, it's been some dark periods, but it seems like we're coming out of that and some real success around the corner.
And you're involved in sport across different levels and different sports across the country. Do you feel like the focus now on women's engagement in sport from grassroots levels to the top, are we starting to see that as a flow-on effect with just general interest in not only just the sporting codes, but also women's participation and women's interest growing?
Yeah, most definitely. So I've got a young niece, and she's my barometer for, I guess, the trajectory of women's sport. You know, she's 10, started playing cricket this year. She's played all the sports. She plays AFL at the moment, plays soccer as well, knows everything, watches everything. And yeah, I mean, the fact that she's playing cricket in an all-boys team, you know, she's seen the WBBL on TV and wants to play her part. So I think that's part of it. I think they always say, you know, you can't be what you can't see. And I definitely think there's a tie you can draw to, you know, these young women taking up sport more and more. And, you know, that flows to watching it and generally being a sports fan as well. So I think, you know, flash forward 20 years, it's remarkable now seeing, you know, the crowds we're getting for the Matildas and the ratings. You know, that's only going to flow to other sports, you know, NRLW, AFLW, rugby sevens growing all the time. So yeah, it's going to be, the next gen is going to be another story altogether.
Aside from the cricket, for me, I think the rugby sevens, the women's team, that was the barometer of women's sport, particularly at the Olympic level, when you see the top stars just dominating teams. When the Australian team comes together, what they've been able to do overseas, that is just phenomenal. And you hear the commentary over the top of that, and they're just the callers are just going, falling over their feet about just how good the standard is, and bringing it to life in a way that women's sport just hasn't really been delivered over the last sort of 5-10 years and ever really.
Yeah, and I mean, in women's sport, I mean, as a fan, when you're watching it, some of them, you watch, say, the NRLW. I love watching the NRLW because I feel it's more attacking and more entertaining than the male version. And I think the same with women's football. You see a lot more attack. You don't get this caginess that you sometimes get in some of the bigger games in the men's game. So, yeah, I think as an entertainment product, they're definitely there. And there is that argument that, oh, it's, not the same as men's. I don't buy into that. I feel like, they are different, but they're different in a positive way. As I said, NRLW, I love watching it. They hit just as hard as the men.
Yes.
And look, the Matilda show, it can captivate a nation. It's no different. So as an entertainment product, I think there's some sports that have work to do in that area. But, on a whole, I think, again, people are sleeping on these women's sport. They're missing out.
I'll ask a question as a broadcaster because you've observed a lot. But do you think because there's still process and development for some of these major sports where there's probably not as much focus on strategy, but there's a lot of skill development. So therefore, we do see the better players and the better execution of skills start to come to fruition, therefore making it for a more exciting thing. I mean, I look at, having probably worked with you over the with the women's soccer in the A-League W last season, it just felt there was more goals and the better players really stood up. I think as a sporting fan, and I wonder if you feel the same as well, that you just don't know what you're going to get because there's not as much strategy, because we're seeing the talent really rise to the top, and eventually we'll see an evolution to build strategy to counteract that talent.
Yeah, well, the A-League W, for example, is in a bit of a tough spot because we've seen, particularly the last sort of 2-3 years, a lot of those Matildas players have gone overseas. They were sort of splitting their time between the US and Australia, but now generally they're in Europe, most of them in the English game, and some of them in Spain and France. And that's really seen as sort of a talent churn out of Australia. And a lot of players have sort of had to step up from the NPL level. But what has impressed me, I think the standard, obviously there's going to be a natural drop-off when 70% of your sort of core international talent does leave the league. But I think on the whole, I mean, I've been blown away by just seeing that trajectory from the NPL to the A-League W. I mean, I covered the NPL here in New South Wales for about a decade, and year on year, I mean, I played youth league myself, coming through the grades, and they're a lot more skillful than I am. They're a lot more technically minded. Like people say, oh, the curriculum has it been a waste of time? Definitely not. No. I think about the coaching I got. I now see the coaching that the players coming through today receive. It's not perfect, but you're making better footballers, better technically, and you mentioned the tactics and the mindset. They don't just know one way of playing. They've got multiple ways of playing, and we are making better footballers. And I think we're seeing the early signs of that in the past couple of World Cups.
Exactly. It's super exciting. Now, we're going to turn the attention on you, mate. As I like to ask all the key question is, what got you into being a play-by-play broadcaster? Was it something you were a young kid and you saw or listened to a bit of commentary and you're like, yep, that's what I want to do? Or was it something that just evolved over time?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I'll start by saying I was a weird child and probably a weird adult. For those listening that know me, probably can say, yeah, that's true. But I just loved sport as a kid. I played pretty much everything, constantly watching it. My life and even now, I mean, my life and work are sport. I'm quite fortunate, but I have a couple of sisters, so I would spend most of the time just by myself out in the backyard kicking the ball around or whatever, and I would actually commentate. As weird as that sounds, so I was a bit of a weird kid. So I'd be impersonating, Rabs Warren or Bruce McAvaney or whoever, whatever sport I was playing. I'd commentate in the backyard, and I sort of came to about 18, 19 leaving school, and I knew obviously I was obsessed by sport. I wanted to do something in that sports realm, in the media. Didn't get the marks to go to uni to do journalism. So I sort of fell into community radio and trying to, I guess, develop skills there. And, that was the path for me initially. And I guess a long story short, I ended up at 2SRFM, which is a community station in the Sutherland Shire in Sydney. And the station manager said, look, we're looking for someone to call games, the Sutherland Sharks, the local NPL team. And I was like, right place, right time. I mean, it was sort of the stars aligning. I'm like, yeah, I mean, and that was, I just went from there. So, I mean, I've been impersonating Martin Tyler for probably 10, 15 years before that. And, people ask me, they're like, how do you develop a style, or how do you come up, as a commentator, how do you begin? And I think the base is always somewhat of impersonation. I mean, your guide is generally someone that you grew up listening, whether it's Ray Warren, Bruce McAvaney, these iconic names that have filled Australian sport and world sport. So it's really a launching pad from there. You're doing your best sort of Martin Tyler impersonation, and then as you get better and as you gain experience and find your own style, you sort of refine it from there. But I mean, look, I started when I was 18. I'm 36 now. I kind of feel like I'm still refining my style. I still think it's a constant work. Every game you're getting better and learning and trying to develop. So yeah, that's sort of where it all started, and it's been quite a ridiculous ride since. I mean, I often think back, when I was 18 leaving school, as I said, didn't get the marks to get into journalism. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. It's quite far-fetched. How do I make it happen? Flash forward to 36 now and all the things I've done in my career. And, I'm certainly not a superstar or a huge name in the industry, but I've done some pretty cool things. And sometimes you just sit there and go, it's been quite a ride. So I'm very lucky.
It's good you take the time to reflect on it, and that's super important, because I guess it helps you enjoy it a little bit more. One of the bits of advice I try and give to callers who want to improve their craft is basically listen to everything, and then take the bits and pieces that you like and look at the things you don't like and actively resist against bringing that into your style. So then you can build that foundation of what you want, because you have to. Am I right in saying you really have to have that foundation of something that's purely you, but obviously it's a menagerie of a few other bits and pieces you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, it'll develop as you go as well, and there's different styles of broadcasting as well. I mean, a radio call is not the same as a TV call. If you're doing something for streaming now, which is more, pretty common these days, that could have elements of a TV broadcast in it as well, as a presenting role as well. So there's so many different skills you've got to constantly develop, but you're exactly right. Always listen back. I always try to listen. You're always very damning of your commentary. You're always like, I wish I could have done that. You could always have done it better. And you're always looking for ways to do it better, but also talk to people. I've been lucky to send tapes to people and send links and say, hey, can you give me some advice? Names that are familiar in the game, across multiple sports, and the guys that you're trying to get a job off in terms of being a commentator. You're always listening to their feedback, because they're the ones you want to impress and want to learn from ultimately.
Let's start back to when you finished high school and you knew you weren't going to get the marks to get into journalism, but you had that community radio thing that you were going to sink your foot into. What were you doing at the same time? Did you end up going to uni? Did you end up doing part-time work? And how did you find juggling all that while still harboring that interest and passion to go, I want to sink my teeth into this calling?
Oh, it's been a hustle from 18 to probably 30, to be honest. I mean, I've had a pretty good security the last sort of 5-6 years in my career in terms of work, but before then it was a real hustle. Just taking opportunities, trying to survive really. Casual work, part-time work, trying to find media roles where I could grow and learn, but also I've got to be conscious too. And I found this really difficult to juggle in my career was, if I'm calling for Fox Sports, I can't write articles for someone that isn't News Limited, So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge and did come quite tricky at times, but I just found the biggest advice I could give anyone is just throw yourself into everything. So whatever the sport, whatever the gig is, if it's commentary, if it's an MC. I think the versatility to me is my biggest strength and where I've learnt the most. I'm at the moment obviously work as a commentator. I work in media and in public relations as well, but also I do MC work for Sydney FC and various other clubs. So, and that's just been from, oh, we need an MC. Okay, yeah, I'll do it. And you can only get better with experience. The more you do it, and obviously the more you learn. And they all sort of blend together. I mean, those skills, those MC skills will help you in your commentary and presenting skills and whatnot. So you're just adding strings to your bow. But yeah, from that age of 18, it was working casually. Like my mates still rib me about the amount of jobs I've had. Not that I was a bad employee. I don't think I've ever been sacked from any of them, but it just trying to make them work with sporting calendars and, casual work. I used to work in a bar and they're like, why do you need Saturday night off? You're doing a radio call for $0. So it may not look the sound as career moves from a financial standpoint, but I just knew that I basically wanted to say, and I still want to say, if I never make it to the high levels that I want to go to, at least I can look in the mirror and say, well, I gave it everything I had. I did everything. I was fully committed. So, I mean, hopefully I do get there. But if not, I mean, as I said before, like I've done so much and I'm so lucky to have been involved in the things I am involved in. So, but yeah, I hustle. And that's what it takes. I mean, you're going to have a work ethic. And I've missed that many birthdays, weddings, 21st, constantly missing those things because I put the commentary and everything else first, and it's sacrifice. That's unfortunately what you need a bit of in this industry to
it's hard to
make
say
it.
no, isn't it? It's because you see the competitive industry. It doesn't matter what level you're at and what sport that you're at. As if you had said no for that one time, and when you started off at a community radio to call the games, they would have asked somebody else. They would have taken the spot. So it's such a competitive industry at any level that you just have to keep saying yes. And I guess it does come at a cost to missing of things, as you've said, and when you're chasing the dragon, so to speak, of going, well, this is what I want to get to. So you end up having to say yes 99 times out of 100, even if it throws you out somewhere else.
And it's such a sliding doors moment. I mean, I've got a great story of one where I got asked to do an MC gig in Newcastle, and it was when the Asian Cup was on. Mm-hmm. And I think it was Auckland City were playing Japan in like a practice game in Cessnock before the Asian Cup. And they're like, oh, we need an MC. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I've never really done it before. And I did it. It was fine. Obviously no football, so got my way through it. It's basically just reading a script. It's not too difficult. And then the next week, and I'd put on social media that I was doing this and some clips of what I did. And the next week, the West Tigers actually reached out to me and like, oh, we saw that you were doing some MC work. We actually need an MC this year. Do you want to do it? I'm like, okay. So it just goes to show, like, sliding doors moments, you take that opportunity. I had done some MC before, but I was still very raw to it, and it can lead to something like that. So yeah, grab those opportunities and just do your best. And sometimes a bit of luck helps as well. Sometimes those things can happen. So
that's the advantage, I guess, of using social media to really plug and showcase some of the work that you've done, because you just never know who may have a listen or a watch and go, you know what, we want to get that person and get them involved in what we're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm the type of person that probably not evident in this podcast because I'm just talking nonstop, but I'm not someone that will. I'm a bit standoffish. I'm a bit shy in that sense. I'm not someone that will constantly just push myself forward and say how good I am. But one thing I think I've done well is the social media. Use that to showcase my work, and you'd be surprised the amount of opportunities that come from that. And a lot of it is just reminding those people that you're still around. You're still doing this stuff. You're still active, and people are looking for someone. They go, oh, that's right, I saw that clip from Adam on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever. That's sometimes how it can work as well. So you've got to market yourself at the same time. It's something that, as I said, doesn't really come naturally to me, but it is important because you need to show what you're doing and show you're there and you want to work.
I guess I'd probably come from the same sort of ilk as well, is that I'm not one of those people that I'll just go, hey, look at me, this is what I'm doing. When I don't know about you, but when I use social media, whether it be TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, I like showcasing the passages of play that I had the privilege as a fan with a microphone on to be able to call. So as much as I'm going, hey, cool, listen to this little bit of commentary or listen to this little bit of work that I've done, but look, here it is. This is what I got to see. How awesome is this? Is that something you sort of relate to as well, to go, hey, that's probably more of the foundation of pushing through, going, hey, look at how cool of what this happened on the weekend that I was able to be a part of.
Yeah, and the A-League Grand Final last year is the perfect example. Such huge moment. No one expected the Mariners to do what they did, and
No.
you sort of sit back after that and go, "I got to call that." So you're 100% right. And we're all fans at the end of the day. It's not about we do for work, but at the same time, I am a sports fan at the end of the day. I was in the grandstand for most of the Women's World Cup, just as every other football fan, spending my hard earned. I'm a Canterbury Bulldogs fan and constantly at their games with everyone else, and so you can't lose that as well. Ultimately, we are fans at the end of the day.
So let's dial it back again. You're 18, 19-year-old. You get involved in the community radio. You go out. You put the cans on for your first game. What's it like in the lead up to that as a young person coming through, and how are you feeling? What's the preparation like? And I know you've caught a lot of sports since then, but what are your memories of that whole occasion?
Yeah, I don't really remember being nervous, and I think it was, it's obviously community radio. You're not got thousands of people tuning in, but you've got a passionate audience. They would make themselves known through my time there at TWSR. But yeah, it was really player ID and getting into that habit of that core play-by-play was I guess the main learning for me. You go out there and sort of do your best, but I know when I listened back to those first 5-6 games I did, I'm like, oh, the player ID needs some work. So it's about doing research as well. Every commentator will tell you. The amount of research I do before a game, 4 or 5 days going through. Fortunately, the A-League will send out sort of a stats book before every game. You sort of go through and obviously you do your own research as well. But that first sort of 5-6 games, I was doing research, but nothing to the degree of what I do now. And that makes such a difference to your commentary. When you're not calling the game, your ability to fill those gaps and just add that little bit of color to the broadcast. So, but I think when people commentate, I think people feel like anyone can do it until they actually do it. And then they realize how hard it actually is. And I think I was probably the same. You're like, oh yeah, I follow sport. I love football. It can't be too hard, but you sort of understand post game. You're like, oh, okay, there's some real work involved in this. So
and it's
I learned that
isn't it?
It's so time consuming, and as most commentators will know, like I'll have about 20 bits of paper in front of me. You've probably seen the box when
Yes,
I'm in there. It's a bit of chaos, but and you'll use like 3 or 4 of those pages. So, but the rest of it is generally imprinted upstairs somewhere in your brain. So, yeah, the biggest learning for me in those early days was research, and in terms of player ID, just getting to know who the players are, which is again, I guess, part of research as well.
So you get through your first few games and you sort of settle in. How do you go from calling on community radio to the next step, and what sort of happened in that process?
Yeah, so I called the NPL for about 2 or 3 seasons just on community radio and always sort of reaching out to people and saying, okay, how can I get better? How can I improve? Getting that feedback, just continually working. I called a few other things as well. I was calling rugby union every now and then, AFL as well. And basically Football New South Wales started using me doing some voiceover and doing some highlights on their highlight show, which they do every week. So I would actually sit in my car Sunday night from about 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. just recording voiceovers and various forms of commentary, which we'd actually do in post-production. So I wouldn't actually call the games. I would call like highlights of the games, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So that, which is another art form as well. So the call in post-production, which I've done a little bit of in commentary as well, that's an art form as well, because you obviously, sometimes you know the result or you know what happened, you know how the goal was scored before you start calling it. So sort of faking it or trying to be a bit creative in the way you call the game that you already know the result of, is a challenge. So that was a new skill in doing that. And that sort of led me to doing a lot more with Football New South Wales. And then the trajectory from there was FFA Cup with Fox Sports. And then that has led to A-League games and some W-League games, and some of the biggest stuff I've done in my career. So that's probably over like a decade, maybe 8 or 9 years, that journey. But the NPL was so valuable. I mean, that again was a step up, allowed me to just again cultivate those skills. And I went from doing Sutherland Sharks games to doing, a couple of games a week, every week. So just elevated my game that more and more.
It's always important to have that reflection of where you come from. I personally, I go to every game, and for those watching on YouTube, I have a stubby holder of my local footy netball club back home in Victoria. Not only just a reminder of where I got in the door myself and where I started to fall in love with sport, but it's a reminder that every single game that I call at whatever level, I always have a coffee and I always have that stubby holder as a reminder of my roots. And even though I haven't been sort of tied with that competition for quite some time, that always comes with me. Do you sort of reflect on that a fair bit, to where you sort of come and how important that was to giving you the opportunities you've had going forward?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm super conscious of the opportunities that have been given to me to hone my craft and sort of take me to the next level. I mean, the NPL in New South Wales was huge for me. I'm not here today where I am without that. I haven't called there for a couple of years, and that was just a case of just too much of a workload trying to juggle everything to make it work. But still very much across the competition as a fan. And I'm not the only commentator that was coming through the NPL. There's a host of names around Australia. I mean, I'm blown away at some of the talent that's coming through, which, I mean, is competition for me. But I guess, you want to welcome it if it's coming. And, particularly in the NPL New South Wales, there's a host of callers that can certainly, match me and hopefully have fine careers as well. So, they're doing a great job giving opportunities to a ton of callers, and it certainly wouldn't be here today without that experience as well.
Shows the importance of community radio to ultimately lead your path into commercial radio. Now, you're 36. You've called a fair few awesome sporting hot moments and things like that. Give us a bit of a rap sheet of some of the organisations you've sort of worked for. I know you've already touched on it. I know you're tied with you at SEN. And who are some of the organisations that you've been fortunate enough to do some work with along the journey?
I mean, obviously NPL New South Wales was the main one for me. And then obviously the A-League as well, Fox Sports, gave me some great opportunities. I mean, I remember 30th birthday, I think 3 days after it, I made my A-League debut on Fox Sports, which was always a huge milestone for me. And then I was working for news.com at the time. I flew to WrestleMania to do some interviews with the WWE. I was interviewing Hulk Hogan about 2 days later. And I remember sitting there at the end of that week just going, so I did my A-League debut, which was like bucket list. That's the dream. And now I'm at WrestleMania interviewing Hulk Hogan. I was just like, this is a ridiculous week.
Which WrestleMania was that one?
I was in Orlando, so is that 30, I think? Or 33, sorry. 33, I think it was. Yep. Yeah, so it was 2017. So, just the amount of things. I mean, NEFL, I called the NEFL here in Sydney, the Sydney AFL as well. I've been involved with them over the years. Just a host of sporting leagues like I've done. I mean, that many calls, the amount of emails I get sometimes, I'm like, I'll do it. I've done the last 3 years. I've done the Women's National Championships rugby league on the Gold Coast, which has been really cool. And just seeing, I guess, as I was saying before, the growth of that and the skill level of those players and going through the NRLW has been a real highlight to be involved in. So, I mean, in terms of that middle tier level, the NPL level, there's not too much I haven't done at that level. For me, it's about breaking. I really want to break through to that next level now consistently. I mean, I do some stuff, but there's still more for me to do in terms of ambition. And, as I said, I'm 36 now. I did my A-League debut on Fox Sports at 30. I think I'm a better commentator than I was when I got that opportunity or got those opportunities. I just feel I've improved a lot. I'm more confident as a caller. And I just think you just get better the more games you do. So I look back now and I think I wish I had that now, because I feel like I would smash it out of the park. Not that it was a failure or anything like that, but I just think, look, I would do a much better job today with that. So not a regret, but yeah, I just feel like the opportunities I had then, if I had them again now, I think it'd be a different outcome.
But I guess it goes to show, and you've mentioned it before, it's a sliding doors moment. If you were so good in that moment, then the door might have opened somewhere else and you might have been taken on a different trajectory that may not be where you are. And that's the reality of it. Your life can change just like that in a heartbeat, in terms of one person could be there watching a video on LinkedIn and go, hey, let's get that person involved, and away you go.
Yeah, that's it. And look, I was fortunate. The A League, I had that development through the NPL, the FFA Cup, now the Australia Cup, and obviously getting some opportunities to do A League women and A League men. It shows there's a pathway for callers. I mean, and a lot of people get a bit disheartened because they're not getting those opportunities. I mean, there aren't that many opportunities at that real top level. Free to air TV, commercial TV with Foxtel. You've got to really graft away. There's a pack of people wanting that opportunity. So you just got to keep plugging away. And ultimately, if you love it like we do, you will keep chipping away because you want it that bad.
And it goes back to what Daniel Viles and I were talking about in episode 1 of Play by Pod, is that we spoke about how the streaming world has grown here in Australia, that it becomes more of why isn't something getting streamed, and from a sporting nature at any level, and then what the capacity is to have callers on there. I see that if you can't get to that top level, do the things that you can, and don't be disheartened by those getting opportunities above you. It's the nature of the beast, but fall in love with the fact that you can call at the level that you can, and I guess appreciate, even if you do drop down a couple of levels, that what that does for the profile of that sport or that competition, it's invaluable.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, like I'm 36 now. In those 6 years since I got that opportunity with Fox Sports, I feel like I've gotten better, and that's just crafting my skills and just staying active and taking those opportunities wherever they come to get better and just develop myself as a caller. And I was really hardened. Jason Bennett is someone that I've had a little bit to do with in my role with ESPN, and I remember he posted on LinkedIn a few months ago about how he didn't call a game for about 15 years in commentary because he was living in the States doing some stuff for ESPN. And he said he always had that dream and he always worked at it. And you look at where he is now and you think, I feel that's great filler for anyone that's got that ambition. Just because it's not working now doesn't mean a couple of years down the line, 5 years down the line, it could be very different. So, get out there, do the work, and who knows?
It's funny that you mentioned Jason Bennett, because I know in my commentary circles, he's a guy that we sort of look to and admire, and a few of us have had the privilege to spend some time chatting with him and learning about how he got into it by accident, and how it sort of took off. And it's just amazing with the perseverance. Is there some callers that you look at present and you will actively go out of your way to listen to them because you like their styles or you like the way they sort of deliver a particular broadcast?
Yeah, mainly in football. I think Martin Tyler for mine has been the go-to, and I know he was criticised a little bit for his commentary during the World Cup on SBS, and I didn't necessarily subscribe to that, but yeah, he's someone, if he's calling a game, he just adds that sort of appeal to it, that he elevates the broadcast, because you're like, some of the iconic moments in football. For him, I think in terms of rugby league, I'm a big fan of Andrew Voss and AFL. I think Bruce was just so good and so beloved, because particularly when you got the context of a commentary and you've been a caller, you understand. I think you respect those little moments. They can add so much to a broadcast by saying 2 or 3 words, or just coming up with that perfect bit of information, or that line, which, there's times where you wonder when you're watching the broadcast, you wonder, like, did they come up with that in advance? Did that just come on the spot? Because some callers will actually, and it is a skill, they will craft something. They'll think, okay, if this guy scores a goal, I've got this little tidbit of information. I'm going to craft this like clever line and throw it in my commentary. nine times out of 10, it sounds too artificial. It sounds like
Mm.
you've had it ready up your sleeve, but the good ones can camouflage that. And you go, was that off the top of their head, or did they actually come up with that beforehand? So yeah, those real established callers, there's an art to what they do, and I know I sit there and go, I wish I could be at that level, but that's a learning, you know.
But I think it comes down to the foundation of what it's like for you as a caller. I don't know about you, but me personally, I don't even want to think about what could happen. I just like putting the cans on and living in the moment. And
Mm,
what you're getting through the cans is as authentic and as a genuine as like if I could be in the stands as a footy fan or a cricket fan or whatever, that's the reaction I would be giving. And so if I come up with one of those one-liners, I'm not planning those in advance. They come out in the moment because I'm a sporting fan going, how good's this? And I think thinking back to what you said earlier about you sitting in the car and you're looking over highlights, you know the predetermined results. There's living in the moment, and then there's living the moment's already passed. How do you separate the two, and where do your strengths sort of lie in that sense?
yeah, well, I think you're 100% right. I think the best commentary comes when it's genuine and it's live, and you are living in that moment. You know, where a fan that's seeing this wonder goal and you're getting that pure reaction in seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where the commentary's the best, and I think every commentator should shoot for that. I mean, I know commentators do use these clever lines and try to work that in, and I've sat there at times and go, oh, okay, if Tim Cahill scores, oh, that'd be a cool line to say.
Mm.
And I never use it just because I'm taken in the moment. You know, you
Yeah.
go with whatever comes to you. So I think that's the way you should commentate. But there are aspects where you can curate and try to finesse things a bit. And to your point, when you're doing, it's rare, but occasionally you'll get gigs to do like post production or call a game to make it, they call it a look live,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And that's a challenge because you're trying not to sound too artificial. So the key for me with that is I try to do it first take, as if I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting fresh eyes on it, as if it's a live game for me.
Yep.
Because I feel like it's a bit like a podcast. I mean, you know, you record a podcast and say you have technical problems and you try to do it again,
Yeah.
it's never as good the second time. And that's the same as commentary. You've got to live in that moment. So I think you're 100% right.
Now, fast track 10 years time, what's Adam Santarossa going to have achieved? What's your pie in the sky sort of stuff where you're like, that's what I'd love to call, or that's what I'd love to do, and well, that's where I'd love to be?
Yeah, I'd love to do more in football. There's a bit of a challenge for me at the moment in terms of employment. I obviously work for the Walt Disney Company, so I work for ESPN. So Paramount Plus have the rights to the A League, so that's a bit of a challenge for me in terms of employment front. But I mean, I'm fortunate. I've got a great job with ESPN that I love. I mean, you mentioned before that trajectory from an 18-year-old Adam to 36-year-old Adam. There were a lot of jobs in there that Adam didn't necessarily like going to work every day, you know, to try to, you know, my love was radio, my love was commentary, and I'm working in bars, I'm working, you know, in retail stores trying to earn money to survive, you know, and what I really want to do is what I do now. So I'm very fortunate. So I love my role with ESPN, so I hope to continue there long term. They're a great company and really exciting company to work for. But in terms of the commentary, I mean, yeah, I just love. I've got a bucket list or a list of goals that I sort of write down every year. You know, I'd love to do something at a World Cup. That's a real bucket list for me, which I think is a little bit far fetched at the moment, but something I certainly want to work towards. And I'm a massive boxing fan as well. The two sports I've sort of loved the most since I was a kid have been boxing and football. So I would love to do like a big fight. I've called boxing before. I was lucky to be involved in a couple of shows for ESPN over the years as well. And I would love to call a big fight, whether that's an Aussie or a world title or whatever. That's a real dream for me. So, but look, to answer your question, I think the goal for me is, you know, I'm in a situation where I love what I do. I wake up every day. I love to go to work. I'm fortunate that, you know, I work at ESPN. I work for Sydney FC as their MC. You know, I do commentary around that. It's pretty full on, but I love it. And my hobby is what I do for work every day. And I know people that, you know, do far more difficult jobs that they don't love. I get to go to work every day and do something I love. So in 10 years' time, I just hope to still be able to do that and you know, be doing something I love every day.
So
because yeah.
when you work for your hobby, you've got to find another hobby. What are your hobbies? In the sense that do you sit back and watch sport, or do you switch off and find other things to put your energy to?
Yeah, it's changed a little bit in the last sort of 5 or so years. So I was working as a journalist for a decade or so. So I mentioned earlier I didn't get the marks to be a journalist, but I ended up going to uni and sort of back ending it through my media experience. So obviously started in community radio. I moved into TV at Channel 10 for a little bit there, and sort of commentary work and whatever. I sort of had this zigzag path to what I do now in the media, and that's sort of where it's come from. So for me, yeah, it's just about, I guess, developing my skills and trying to cultivate that path over the last decade or so. So
Magnificent. And for those who are a fan of this show on Play by Pod, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Jump on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. We've got it all. That's where you'll be able to access some of the content. Now, every episode, I'd love to sit down with a superstar that I've got opposite me and chat about one key learning issue or learning matter that we can sort of feed back to those listening that might be able to help improve their craft. So, mate, you are an expert, in my opinion, and hopefully the opinion of many others on many sports and being able to call. So this issue that we're going to be looking at today is transitioning from one sport to another as a play-by-play caller. How hard is it, or how easy is it?
yeah, look, I find it easy because I generally try to do sports that I have an interest in and have a knowledge in. I feel like, for me, that's football, that's boxing, AFL. They're the main sports. I've done cricket as well. Sports that I've either played or I have a real passion for and sort of an in-depth knowledge. And that's been the difficulty. I think when you do other sports, it's a struggle if you don't know it inside and out. I mean, I know basketball, but I don't really know it intimately. I haven't really played the game myself. So I feel like I can do it, but not to the level that it probably should be done at. So I've had opportunities in sports that I don't really know all that well, and you can do all the research in the world, but I feel like it's got to be natural because, when I flick from AFL to rugby league to football calls, you're using different vernacular. There's different ways of speaking. You've got to have a level of understanding. I don't think you can go in without that real knowledge. So I try to stick to sports that I feel like genuinely I have the knowledge to do it justice. I don't really want to do sports where I'm faking it or trying to make it up as I go, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's not difficult to switch between, but you do have to obviously be mindful. I know when I do rugby league games, there's been times where I'm like, oh, that's a football vernacular. I need to switch that. So you do catch yourself every now and then, but again, it's down to preparation and research. But yeah, those sports I'm not intimately, familiar with, I try to stay away from because I just don't feel I could do it justice.
I'm going to open up Pandora's box, mate, and probably sort of take some gloss of some of the things that I've done. But if I've gone to a new sport, like I've called basketball before, it's with Australian National Basketball Championships at different levels, and NBL one, and even squash and cricket. One of the things that I've always sort of been big on personally is having an incredible special comments person, because what I was calling it on the Gold Coast in December last year, and I sat back with someone who I just met, and they're like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And I said, well, look, you're a coach. You know the game inside out. So when it comes to special comments, I'm going to learn from you. So when they gave their special comments, I just shut up. I listened, I learned, and then I took little bits and pieces from them, like a spider web, just sort of funneling into me, and then gradually building on from there. And I've even done that with NBL 1 this year, as it's someone that could do play-by-play, but had a really good knowledge of the game. I sat next to him, and I fed off him like a sponge and just learned as much as I could. And eventually, as the game sort of progressed, I was able to include some of the things that he was saying into my call and enhance the call. But I guess that, in a sense, when you're calling different sports that you're not as familiar with, you've got to take that leap of faith sometimes, don't you? And just sort of throw yourself in there.
Yeah, well, great example for me. I did an amateur boxing show for ESPN. I did the commentary, the Elite Boxing Championships in, I think it was 2017. I'd called a lot of professional boxing, but I never actually called any amateur boxing. And I was like, okay, I know the principles of boxing. I've watched amateur boxing. I know how the scoring works and whatnot. But part of the preparation for that show, I actually printed off the Australian amateur like rule book, and I went through every single rule, and just so I had that understanding of, okay, if this happens in a fight, what happens? What is the outcome? Because I called something like 30 fights a day. It was like a bit of a blur. And there was an example on like the last day, there was a foul and one of the fights was called. And I could go back to that knowledge and go, actually, that's that rule that I read. So you just never know. You may never use that, but that little tidbit of information can sometimes save the day, which it did on that occasion. So if you aren't familiar, research. And as you say, talk to people. I mean, I spent so much time talking to coaches and then the fighters themselves, referees, the amateur referees, and saying, okay, can you explain this to me? Why does this happen? Why did you call that in that fight? Just to develop that understanding. So, you can never do too much research. You can never ask, there's no stupid questions because it's going to reflect in your commentary, I think, that preparation.
Particularly when you get the opportunity to speak with them, you're almost sort of engaging with the audience. If you're speaking to referees, you're speaking to boxers, fighters, coaches, chances are they're going to be looking back on that footage at some point as a way for them to improve if that's something that they're sort of involved in. So if they've passed on some knowledge to you that you end up feeding, I think they would get pretty happy about that too, that you've paid attention and something they've said has contributed to a key moment in whatever it is you're calling.
It's quite funny as well. I know I would often speak to coaches before football games and anything else I'm calling, and they're a little bit cagey. They're like, why do you want this information? Like, why are you asking me about this? I'm like, well, it's to call for my commentary. Like, I'm not going to phone the opposition coach and tell you your game plan or who's going to play. Like, it's just to help my preparation. So a lot of them are quite interesting when you get them on the phone and they're a bit fearful of what you're going to let out. But part of that is obviously developing that trust and that relationship. But yeah, it's quite funny sometimes when you talk to coaches and referees, they're like, why are you asking this? What do you want this for? So it's like, well, we want to do a good job. So
has there been any moment where you've picked up a new sport and the call it went horrible? Like you come from you might have gone to a box. You called your first boxing fight, and you've come off the back of calling a lot of football, or whether it be rugby or soccer, and you've picked up this new sport, and it just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, I don't have anything that has just been a disaster. I haven't had a call that's been a train wreck.
You bounce back from that, don't you?
I think if I have, I've probably repressed them, but I've been pretty lucky in that sense. I mean, I called a game once. It was for radio, and it was Perth Glory and the Mariners. It was actually for a WA station. So I was obviously based in Sydney, and they said, "Oh, we need someone to go up and call the Perth Glory game." It was a youth league game at Plume Park against the Mariners, and they pulled out all the comms that we were meant to plug into to do the radio broadcast. So what I ended up doing, I had to call it into my iPhone, which they then like a caller on a radio station back in WA, they like patched me in that way. So I'm just calling the game into my iPhone, and I'm like, gee, the career's got a way to go from here. So there's some challenges you get thrown. But I remember I did a rugby sevens tournament once as well, and I'd never called sevens before, and trying to just the rapid movement of the ball and the player ID is just ridiculous. So I know the first couple of games I did, I'm like, geez, this is going to be interesting. But you learn from that, right? You learn from those experiences. And yeah, that the one calling into the iPhone, I was like, I don't think I'm going to get a moment like this in my career. This is.
I've called a quarter of a senior local AFL grand final off the phone before. So, and when I did I worked with some of the guys in the Northern Territory Footy League, we ended up calling a whole game off a mobile phone. So that's something that does work. But I guess the key takeaway from this is throw yourself in if there's an opportunity that sort of comes up. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like in order to become a better caller and to make yourself more accessible, you almost have to say yes to different challenges, different sports that you haven't called before. because if you've got more flexibility and a lot more skill set in calling across different sports, do you think that's where the phone calls or the emails or the texts will come a little bit more frequently to do more things?
Yeah, versatility is huge. I mean, I found that as well in the number of sports that I've called. And as you say, you do get better. I mean, I remember when I was in community radio and looking for an opportunity, I got a chance to sit in the Fox Sports box and listen to Mike Cockrell call an A-League game. This would have been like '06, '07, like very early A-League. And I remember him telling me, and it's the best bit of advice I've had. He said, every game you call, you'll get better.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd been calling for like 15, 20 years at that time. And he said, even now I learn all the time. Every game I do, I learn something. I feel like, I could have done that a little bit better. And that's so true. Every single game I do, every sport, whatever it is, whether it's, for TV, radio, a streaming service, whatever the level, you'll pick up something, you'll learn, you'll develop your style of calling. And sometimes it's just confidence doing that extra game, doing that new sport. Doors can really open with, as you say, you just got to get out there and try it.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on board. I know we've got a tight schedule this week because you're heading over to the States, mate, but it is a great pleasure having you on board as part of the Play-by pod. And mate, I look forward to, as many of us will look forward to following your career and seeing where that takes you and enjoying your dulcet tones on wherever we can in the years to come.
Well, I'm hoping someone has found something they can learn from in that last hour or so. But yeah, my advice to everyone is, like, honestly, just go for it. I as I said, I was someone 18, left school, didn't really know how to make this dream happen, and look where I am now. I've done some pretty cool things, and it's just down to hard work and having a go. I mean, a lot of people will tell you, no, you're kidding yourself, you can't do it, you're wasting your time. Don't listen to them. If you want it bad enough, just do the work, and those doors will open.
Sound advice, mate. We do appreciate your time and look forward to seeing your exciting journey still to come.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you.